In the world of finance, there's this really powerful idea for creating fair, ethical, and truly collaborative partnerships. It's called Musyarakah. Today, we're going to unpack exactly what that means and why it's so important, not just for huge financial deals, but for any kind of joint venture you might be thinking about.
So let's say you're thinking about starting a business with a friend, right? Or maybe you want to go in on a property with someone. How do you set that up so that everyone's treated fairly, everyone shares in the wins, but is also protected if things don't go according to plan? Well, that's the exact problem the Musyarakah framework was built to solve.
All right, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the basics, what a shirka, our partnership contract, really is. Then we'll look at its two main flavors, uncover the absolute golden rule for splitting profits and losses, and finally, we'll see how it all works in the real world with a deep dive into Sharia-compliant home loans, looking at the good, the bad, and the controversial.
Okay, let's start at square one. What in the world is an Akkad circa?
So shirka, which you'll also hear called musyarakah, they're basically the same thing, is just a formal partnership. The word akad literally means contract. So an akad, shirka, is simply a partnership contract. It's an agreement where a couple of people, or more, decide to pool their resources. And that could be anything: cash, property, skills, even just their good reputation, all with the shared goal of making a profit. Think of it as the bedrock for any Islamic business partnership. Now, here's something that trips a lot of people up. The term mudarba. Are they the same thing? Well, not quite. The easiest way to think about it is that musyarakah is the big, giant umbrella for partnership. Mudaraba is just one very specific type of partnership under that umbrella, the kind where one partner puts up all the money and the other partner does all the work. So yeah, every mudaraba is a partnership, but there are so many other kinds of partnerships too. And this idea of partnership isn't just one size fits all. Islamic law actually breaks it down into two main categories. One that's about just owning something together, and another that's about actively doing business together. So, on one side, you've got shirka amlak, or joint ownership. This can happen without anyone even signing anything. The classic example? A couple of siblings inherit a house from their parents. Boom, they are now partners in owning that house. But on the other side, you have shirka uqud, or a contractual partnership. And this is what we're really focusing on. This is when you intentionally get together, sign a contract, and start a business venture to make money. And under this business partnership umbrella, you find all these really flexible models. I mean, you've got partnerships based on capital and labor, partnerships of pure labor, where everyone just brings their skills to the table. You can even have partnerships based on creditworthiness or reputation. And, of course, there's that mudaharba model we just talked about. It just goes to show you how adaptable this whole framework is. All right, listen up, because we've reached the absolute core of any real Musyarakah deal. Seriously, if you take only one thing away from this explainer, this is it. This is the non-negotiable rule that makes it fair and completely different from conventional finance. Okay, so let's talk about the good times. The business is doing well, profits are rolling in. How do you decide who gets what? The answer is pretty much however you want. The distribution of profits is flexible. It's based on whatever ratio the partners agreed to right at the beginning. And this is so important because it lets you reward things like extra work or special expertise. If you put in 50% of the money but you're doing 80% of the work, you guys can agree to a profit split that reflects that, maybe 70-30. It's all up to you. But, and this is a huge but, what happens when things go wrong? When the business loses money? Well, the rule changes completely. There is zero flexibility here. And here's the punchline. Losses must be shared strictly based on the percentage of capital each partner put in. If you invested 60% of the startup cash, you have to bear 60% of the financial loss. End of story. You absolutely cannot create a contract where one partner is protected from loss while the other takes all the risk. So let's just nail this down. Profit sharing can be creative and flexible, but risk sharing is rigid. Any contract that guarantees one partner a return on their money without them having any skin in the game, without any risk of loss, is considered a form of riba or usury. Why? Because at that point, it's not a real partnership anymore. It's just a loan wearing a partnership costume. Okay, so theory's great, but how does this ancient idea actually work today? Let's look at a really common modern product you might have come across, Musyarakah Mutanakisa, or MMQ, which is often used for Sharia-compliant home financing. So the whole thing starts in a really interesting way. Instead of you getting a loan from the bank, you and the bank actually become co-owners of the house together, right from day one. So let's say you put down a 10% deposit. The bank puts in the other 90%. Right at that moment, you're officially partners in what's called a joint ownership partnership.
From there, the process unfolds in 3 key stages. First, you have the joint purchase. We just covered that. Second, since you're living in the whole house but you only own 10% of it, you pay the bank rent for using its 90% share. And third, with every monthly payment you make, you're also buying up a tiny piece of the bank's share. You're gradually increasing your ownership bit by bit until you get to 100%. That's why it's called mutanakisa. It means diminishing, because the bank's share is constantly diminishing over time.
Now, in theory, this sounds like a perfect modern application of partnership. But in practice, well, it's not without its controversies. So let's take an honest, critical look at the arguments for and against how Sharia compliant it really is. So on the plus side, MMQ is a huge deal because it offers a real alternative to interest-based mortgages. It's built on equity, not debt. But the critics raise some really important points. First, there's the bundling of contracts. Making the rent and the buyout mandatory parts of the same deal is a red flag for some scholars. But the bigger issue, arguably, comes back to risk. In a true partnership, if the roof starts leaking, both partners should share the cost of fixing it. But in a lot of MMQ contracts, that responsibility falls 100% on the customer. And it's issues like these that make some people feel that, in reality, it can end up looking and feeling a lot like a conventional loan.
And this brings us right back to the main point of all this. Musyarakah, in its purest form, isn't about finding clever ways to structure a deal to avoid certain words. It's about a mindset. It's about a genuine, authentic partnership where you have a shared stake in the outcome, for better or for worse. It's all about sharing the risk to fairly share the reward.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you know the golden rule, that losses have to follow the capital, how does that change the way you look at a business proposal or a financial product that uses the word partner? Ask yourself, does this structure really share both the potential profits and the potential risks? Because that's the real test of whether you're looking at a genuine musyarakah.